The meta in Rise of Kingdoms is constantly changing, so today, fresh off the heels of my latest KVK, I'm going to be sharing with you guys the new best open field commander pairs in Rise of Kingdoms. We're going to go over the best 3 army lineup, 5 army lineup, 6 army lineup, 7 army lineup. We're going to cover everything in this video, but first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a sponsored creator with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you guys want more raw content, consider liking the video and subscribing down below, and let's jump right in here. But before we do, remember that this is not an investment tier list. This is not the order with which you should be getting these commanders. This video is just a snapshot in time, the current meta at the time of recording this, which is the beginning of October 2025. And a quick disclaimer, we should be learning the skills and information for the upcoming 2 KVK commanders for the Song of Troy KVK. That is none other than Achilles and Hector. So we don't know if they're cavalry, infantry, archer, whatever, but stay tuned to the channel and keep your eyes peeled because we will cover that as breaking news. But until they come into the game and until the next cavalry release comes out, we're going to go over what the best 7 army lineup is today, right now. Okay, the first place that we have to start, if you're only going to run 1 army in the open field right now, that is none other than Emperor Qin, and you've got 2 options. Okay, if you're a brand new player and you still have YSG, you didn't swap him for anything, then this is the pairing that you're going to run. If you did get rid of him or you have Zhuge Liang, I would say run Emperor Qin with Zhuge Liang. Either way, you can't go wrong with basically either of these commanders. Of course, with YSG, you do need the tier 3 relic, in my opinion. The YSG pairing will deal more damage from what I can tell, but the Zhuge Liang is a little bit safer, especially for those of you that are free to play, low spenders. I think that is probably the safest route to go. But if you're only going to be running 1 army, it's going to be one of these combinations. If you're only running 2 armies in the open field, it's going to be your Archer March with Emperor Qin and Bai Qi with Liu Che. Unfortunately for cavalry, they don't have a great pair for King Arthur right now, and by that I mean they don't have a second AoE combo damage commander that is like busted good. Of course they have Bertrand, but like it's not the same as having another Season of Conquest commander, right? So this might actually change when cavalry get their next commander lineup, but for right now, at the time of recording this, I think this is slam dunk easily the 2 best commander pairs in the entire game. If you're running 3 pairs in the open field, then you have a choice to make. Okay, and this is probably a topic that I'm going to cover a lot more in depth in a future video, maybe a video that I'll do actually quite soon, because I do think that this is super important after the release of the latest crystal tech. But if you're only running 3 commander pairs, that means you're either a new player or you're a free-to-play player, right? And you know, historically the advice would be to run 1 of each of the troop types, right? You would run a cavalry army in pair 3, and if you were going to do that and you were going to continue going that route, then of course you're going to have Arthur here, and you're either going to run him either with Nevsky as primary, or I personally think that the Hua as primary is a little bit better with King Arthur. That's just my opinion. You would run something like this. If you did not get Hua or Nevsky because you're a new player and you're worried about them being power crept, then this is where you would put something like your Philip, right? You could do a Philip here, you could do a William here. I think all of these are great options for a single cavalry march, but the reason that I hesitated is because with the new crystal tech, I think if you're only running 1 of each troop type, you're actually spreading out your crystal tech across 3 different trees, right? And that really doesn't feel good as a free-to-play player. So realistically, I personally would point you in the direction of running probably either a 2 infantry or a 2 archer setup, so that way you only have to invest in 2 of the crystal tech trees. I'm not going to get into that in this video because I do think that that does kind of warrant its own entire video, because now we're talking about crystal tech, and that's like not part of this video. This video is just like talking about the best pairs and, you know, assuming that you can get all the crystal tech you need and that you have all that stuff. So for right now, I'm gonna put the Hua with King Arthur here, but I just want you guys to know that you should keep your eyes peeled for that video, especially if you're a free-to-play player, because it will give you a bit better advice. I think I'm gonna go a bit more in depth for those of you that are only running maybe 3 or 4 marches. Okay, but in a perfect world where you are gonna max your crystal tech, but for some reason reason you're a new player and you only have a handful of commanders, these are the ones that I would run. In the same vein as that, I'm feeling a little bit weary about giving you a 4 army lineup for the exact same reason, where if you're only running 4 armies, you're probably a free-to-play player or a low spender, and that's going to make your crystal tech a little bit tricky. So again, stay tuned for that future video. But for the sake of covering as much ground as possible, because I'm sure there's going to be people down below that ask me about a 4 army lineup, you've got 2 options. Of course, you could run 2 archers, 1 cav, 1 infantry, or you could run 2 infantry, 1 archer, 1 cav. I personally think that right now the 2 archer lineup is probably the way to go, which is kind of shocking, but you're just going to go ahead and pull your Zhuge Liang off of your Emperor Qin and slap Hermann Prime behind him, and now you've got a great 4 army lineup. Now, if you don't have Hermann Prime for whatever reason, then you could run the Philip here if you want. I personally prefer the Hermann Prime. He just outputs way more damage, so this is what I'm going to recommend. Now, if you did want to do the 2 infantry lineup, then it's going to require having access to Ragnar Prime and Scipio Prime, so that might be a little bit harder, because with archers you can get YSG so much earlier. But either way, I think this is also a really solid 4 army lineup. From here, going to 5 armies, this is where honestly you're just going to combine the 2 best 4 army lineups, right? I think currently at the time of recording this, and again, we are expecting the 2 new KVK commanders, Hector and Achilles, and we're expecting a new cavalry launch coming soon within the next, like, I don't know, 2 months or so. We'll probably see a reveal for them within the next month, maybe 6 weeks. So with all that being said, until those things happen, this is what I think is the current best 5 army lineup. It's kind of not even close, unfortunately. Like I said, the star for cavalry right now is King Arthur, and he just doesn't have a proper, real great secondary commander for him for combo, which is really frustrating, right? Honestly, like, if you're a cavalry player, I'm sure you already know this, cavalry players are playing around with like Attila, with like Philip, and we'll get into that later, but like there's a lot of like gymnastics cavalry players are doing right now to like squeeze as many best armies out of what they have as possible. And that's not to say that they're not good, but they're just not on the same level as the other troop types yet. We'll have to wait and see what the upcoming commanders actually are. But with that being said, guys, this is really, like, if I'm trying to think about like what is there any other, like, there's really no, you know, the only other thing that I would change here is like, if you don't have the Hua, or you don't like the Hua, you could just run this, right? Like, if you're a new player and you didn't even start building a skill damage armament set for cavalry, well, and you started with combo out of the gate, well, then you would run something like this, or you would run something like a William here if you've got your Philip somewhere else, right? Like if you're doing this or whatever, that's something that you could do as well. But honestly, like there's just not really a much better alternative to this at the time of recording this video, in my opinion. From there, however, we are going to be moving on to a 6 army lineup, and this is where things get tricky, and this is where I'm kind of leaning on my sort of experience in my latest KVK, in that, you know, there's always, you know, people talking about the best, you know, if you're running 3 of a troop type, what are the best that you can do, right? At the time of recording this, I realized I actually kind of hate running 3 of a single troop type. It actually kind of sucks. Like, if we're being really honest, unless your account is like, if you've spent like over 80 grand on your account or something insane, it's really hard to like feel good about running 3 of a specific troop type. Now, I know it gets a little tricky, like in certain KVKs, like in Tides of War, for example, you have the artifacts which can convert troop types from, you know, one commander's troop type to another. So in my most recent KVK, I converted Zhuge Liang to a cavalry commander to try and make him work. If you want more information about that, check out my most recent video covering my KVK and the best commanders that I used during that KVK, the ones that got me the most KP. So we're not going to be covering that, because I mean, then the floodgates are open and you've got infinite possibilities, right? But all that to say, you know, do I really want to run 3 of a specific troop type? I feel like it's just really hard to argue that these days. It really is. For that reason, I feel like you kind of have to run the 2 cavalry lineup, right? 2 archers, 2 cavalry, 2 infantry. The only other alternative to that would be to run a siege march, right? You could do the Gajamata with Cordoba, or you could do Cordoba with Afonso, who I did not put into the tier maker yet. I do apologize to the ranged players. I have not dug deeper into Afonso yet. Now that he is actually in the game, I can't say for certain if you should go that route or not. So for continuity's sake, I'll just leave this how it is. And, you know, if you're a siege player, you probably already know if he's worth it or not. You don't need to hear it from me, who's not a siege professional. Okay, but let's say that you did not invest in ranged. We're going to move these off to the side here. What would you do then if you had to run 2 cavalry marches? Well, this is where you would pull in the Philip or the William, depending on which one that you actually have. The William is better at removing the skill damage bonuses from things like Emperor Chin YSG. The Philip is just Philip. I mean, he's just great behind your King Arthur. It is what it is. And then from there, your Hua would have to either run with your William or with Joan of Arc Prime. From my experience, this was, you know, the Hua Joan was my worst performing march in my last KVK. Just full transparency, Hua Joan is not what it used to be, unfortunately. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, first of all, Hua is a single target damage commander. His damage output just isn't the same as commanders like King Arthur, Ragnar Prime, Bai Chi, Liu Che. I mean, literally all these commanders output way more damage than Hua, right? Like, it's like insane how bad the single target is. And then on top of that, Joan is great with her double cast, but she doesn't have a lot of stats, and her double cast is a 3 target 2000 damage factor AoE, which is solid. But I mean, if you look at the commanders here, we've got a lot of 5 target AoE commanders here at this point. Okay, we've got 3 target AoE commanders that hit much harder than Joan, and they have more stats. So it's like, you know, even though Joan is a great AoE commander, she's definitely starting to show her age. I don't think that she's falling out of the meta yet, because I do think that the Hua damage output might actually be the bottleneck here, but it'll really just depend on if we get any more skill damage cav or not. We might not, you know, so we'll have to wait and see. Of course, we didn't think we'd get more skill damage infantry, and then we got Ragnar Prime, so like, hey, you never really know, right? Especially with these upcoming KVK commanders. But this is one way that you could run it. Again, if you have the Nevsky instead, you could just run Nevsky Joan. I think that's fine, but you have a weaker active skill, right? So I mean, it is what it is. That's something that you could do. The other thing that you could do, if you are a real cavalry veteran and you've been around, like I'm talking, you've been around for a minute, okay, what you could do would be something like this, where you run the Attila Philip. I hear a lot of people talking about Attila Philip. I personally do not have Attila, so I simply could not test this. I mean, this is just, it's the end of 2025. I'm not investing in Attila these days. I'm just not. It's not. I'll just wait for something better. It just, again, this is what I was talking about before, where like we're doing these gymnastics to make pairs that are just like insane. This pair does not have the big burst damage that you see from a lot of the other commanders here. It's just that burn damage, basically. I know it's not technically burn damage. I want to be very clear here, but it's just like that. It's just that consistent high damage every single turn that Attila is known for. You could try this out. I know a lot of people have been swearing by it. I can't speak on it from my own experience, so for that reason, I'm gonna just leave the Hua Joan here. You guys can let me know what you think in the comment section below. From there, moving on to the best 7 army lineups, the first thing that we have to touch on, of course, is throwing ranged in there. I think that is like the easiest thing that you could do. Let me actually put Philip here just so you guys kind of know what I'm thinking, but I think throwing ranged in here is the easiest way to build out your 7 army lineup. That is assuming that you've invested in range and you like ranged gameplay. I think this is something that you could absolutely do. Again, Afonso might be worth looking at here. I would refer you to the Siege Discord or to Mr. Siege or Dark Siege or one of those guys that really, you know, go all in on the siege stuff, and they'll let you know if Afonso is worth it or not compared to like Ajamata, for example. But I think that's realistically, this is kind of like there's really not much up for debate here. I feel like this is currently the best 7 army lineup. But let's assume again that you don't have ranged, either because you don't like ranged gameplay or you just can't afford to build the set or whatever the case might be. Then you're going to find yourself in a position where you have to run 3 of a specific troop type. And again, I want to reiterate that, you know, I know that us YouTubers like to make it look really cool to run 3 of a specific troop type, but it's not great. I'm going to be honest with you. Like from my most recent experience, like what you're doing when you're running 3 of a troop type is you're sacrificing a really good march to make like 3 B tier marches, right? Like you're going to be, or maybe it's like 1 A tier march and 2 B tier marches, or like an A, B and a C tier march, right? Like you're really spreading yourself out at that point. You're spreading your commander investments kind of thin at that point. And so I really wanted to be clear where like I don't love running 3 of any given troop type, and if you are going to be doing that, you really better be a whale. Like you really better have fantastic gear and armaments for all of them, otherwise you are going to see a big drop off in in the performance of your other marches just because you tried to fit in that third of a specific troop type. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and start with the 3-army lineup for archers right now, because I do think that they have a couple of different options. Okay, first of all, what you could do is obviously you keep the Emperor Qin with YSG, and then you can go ahead and put Zhu Yiliang with Philip. Your William goes behind your King Arthur, and then from here you're going to have to flex in somebody like Ashurbanipal, right? Ashurbanipal with Herman Ashurbanipal, however you want to run that. One's more tanky, one's got higher damage output depending on how you run them, but either way it's a micro optimization, right? That is one route that you could go for your archers. Another thing that you could consider here is actually removing the YSG from Emperor Qin and throwing in Shajar. I know a lot of archer players have been swearing by this commander pairing. I think this pairing works really well in things like Altar, where you can actually only bring in one and you really value the healing there. I think this is actually really great for that, but I did want to at least mention it here because I do know a lot of people have been talking about this pairing, and I think that it deserves a little bit of a spotlight here. I personally do not have Shajar, and I don't really plan on getting her. I'm not an archer main. I only run one archer march, and so I just have no use for Shajar personally. From there, I would actually probably move my Philip back over to my King Arthur, and then I would probably run something like this. That way you can spread out the march speed. Of course, this march is going to have way more march speed than anything. You've only got a little bit of march speed outside of territory with Ashurbanipal, so really be careful with that march for sure. But this is another way you could run it. Or if you wanted the faster march speed with Philip, then of course you could keep running this, run this, and bench the YSG, right? You could do that. I personally do not recommend this. I think like if you're gonna run, there's no reason to bench YSG really. Like if you've got him, you should be running him. That's just how I see it. I feel like he's just so good with Emperor Qin that you really should. But if you were to move him around, I would probably do something like this. Okay, with that being said, those are the different options that you have for archers. I really, I can only speak from my own experience, but I really like the YSG behind the Emperor Qin, so I would try to run that if you can. But again, this is one way to go. From there, let's talk about a 3 infantry lineup when you run 7 pairs in the field. This is what I was trying to run. I was running 6 pairs, but only 1 archer, 2 cav, 3 infantry. That's what I was trying to do. It's not great, to be honest with you. It's really not. I know like a lot of these 3 army lineups might look really great on paper, but you really are spreading yourself pretty thin here. So what is, I think, the most logical thing you could do would be to split up your Bai Chi with Liu Che. You go ahead and try to run something like a Philip behind your Liu Che, or you run the Alexander the Great. This is tried and true. The Alexander the Great, is a little bit less supportive than the Philip, but he does have more march speed. So if you do find yourself with one army that doesn't have like the tier 5 iconic boots, for example, then you might want the extra march speed from the Alex. And realistically, the difference between these 2 commanders in the field is almost negligible for that march. So if you can't flex the Philip over here because you don't have the William for whatever reason, I wouldn't sweat it. I would just run this and feel good about that. And then when it comes to your Bai Chi, you've got 2 different choices here. Of course, you have either William Wallace or Chook, and neither of these commanders are great for this pairing, to be completely blunt with you guys. I don't really want to sugarcoat it here. Moving from Bai Chi Liu Che to Bai Chi William Wallace, it's like a steep drop off in damage output. It's like way worse. But again, if you're trying to run 3, like this is what you're going to be rocking with. Again, I think most people will probably have William Wallace over something like Chook. I personally don't even have Chook max. Ever since they reworked him, it just seemed a little bit too late for me. Like, why would I do that? I really wish I did have him maxed because I did want to test him in this KVK. The reason for that is obvious. It's AoE. Okay, we're talking about the 1500 AoE compared to the single target damage from William Wallace. The AoE on Chook is actually stronger. I know at first glance it doesn't seem like that would be the case, but if you are hitting all 3 targets every single time, it's about 3250 damage factor. I know that's napkin math, and based on like boosts and bonuses, it's going to change that, but like point for point, you will probably be dealing more damage with this AoE than you will be with the single target on William Wallace. Of course, William Wallace does have the 80% chance for a big damage increase on his 3rd skill, although it does have a 10-second cooldown, which is insane. Another reason why I'm not a huge fan of William Wallace. But either way, I think Chook, there's definitely an argument to be made here. I mean, you've got the march speed and you have a lot of attack, and that attack is still pretty valuable now that we have have the new crystal tech, or at least more valuable than it was before, but the rest of his kit I just don't love. 10-second cooldown here is crazy. 15% more normal damage is actually quite nice, especially with Bai Chi. So realistically, I think the Chook, there's a strong argument for trying the Chook here, definitely as a secondary. That being said, however, if you don't love the instant proc nature of the Alexander the Great, you could easily make the argument that you could try to just make a subpar March with something like this, right? Now, of course, that's assuming you have two different pincer formation armaments that you could run here, because these are both, you know, smite damage pairings, right? Everything is smite damage from these two. And of course, if you ran this, I would try to min-max it to where you have your best gear on your best March, your second best gear on your second best March, and then whatever you can run on this last one. This is the pair that I really wish I could have tested this in my current KVK. I'm really curious to see how this would actually do together. So you guys can let me know in the comment section below if you've tried this out. Let me know. This would be a better lineup if what you wanted was to spread out your commanders across all three marches instead of having like a best, second best, third best, that type of thing, especially if you don't have two pincer formations, right? Because obviously the Liu Che doesn't really need it if what you're doing is relying on the instant proc of the secondary. So you could do this with like just an average arch formation or something like that. Like the armaments are less important here because you're just focusing on that instant proc, right? And I will say that the instant proc meta is way worse than it was even a year ago, right? The instant proc meta kind of died when they actually made a stealth nerf to it. You guys might not have even noticed that this is kind of what happened here, but a few updates ago, the developers changed how rapid march works. This is an alliance technology. It used to be the case that you would increase your march speed if your troops were targeting alliance territory, but now it's while you are in alliance territory, and that change kind of killed instant proc marches like the Liu Che Alex or Liu Che Philip. It's still something you can do, but the problem is that before you used to be able to always have, or almost always have, a very fast retreat route where you could hit and run back really quickly, and you would get the bonus to the march speed here from rapid march 1 and rapid march 2, right? Which is like an extra 20 something 22% march speed, right? Which is kind of a lot, right? To lose 22% march speed for that is a bummer, right? So yeah, that kind of stealth nerfed the instant proc, and also a lot of the new commanders like Emperor Qin and the new crystal tech going away from a ton of attack and going more towards defense and health. All of those little things added up to the death of the instant proc meta. So just keep that in mind when you start using Liu Che Alex again. It's not going to be hitting like it was, you know, 9-12 months ago. And then that brings us to 3 cavalry armies. And if you are watching this video today, I would say simply don't do it. Simply don't do it. There's just not 3 fantastic cavalry marches. It just is what it is. I mean, unless you are a Giga Kraken who has gone all on cavalry and you have so many good sets of gear and armaments and everything, even still, this is probably the worst choice of the 3. It's by a lot, kind of. So don't do it. Just don't do it. But I know there's going to be some of you that are going to do it anyway, because that's how you've built your account, and you're not just going to completely nuke your account because it's currently not the best. Honestly, I think with the next cav release, this is probably going to completely change, right? I think that cavs might have a really strong performance with a 3-army lineup, but until that happens, we're kind of forced to scrape the bottom of the barrel, so they say. And with that, what I would recommend is, again, you could run the Attila Philip here, just rock that and just see how that goes for you. Some people swear by it, other people hate it. Another thing that you could do here, if you don't have the Attila, you could try to run the Joan with the Philip, you could run the Arthur with the William, and then you could pull in a Belisarius Prime. This is purely for like swarming things down, really. Like, I guess that's the only time you would even run this, to be honest with you. Realistically, I think Nevsky is actually probably better for swarming than Hua anyway, because especially if you're swarming like a flag or something, Hua doesn't get all of his stats, so just keep that in mind. The safest route though is probably the tried and true, just run your Arthur with Philip, run the Hua with William, run the Nevsky with Joan, or again, you could flip these two around depending on your gear and how you like to run things. If you don't have Philip, or he's somewhere else, like with your Zhuge Liang, for example, which at this point he shouldn't be, most likely, but if he is for whatever reason, you could flex in the Bertrand here, rock the Bertrand behind the King Arthur. And again, if you're not feeling the Nevsky because you feel like he's just a little bit too old, you could try something like this as well. But again, as you can see here, we're kind of like really trying to squeeze every ounce of juice out of the calves as we possibly can. Your mileage is definitely going to vary here depending on how much you've invested in some of these things. Personally, I would point you in either this direction or again something like the Attila Philip direction, just at the recommendation of many that I've seen try this, but I can't vouch for that myself, so I'm not going to go ahead and recommend that. We're going to go ahead and do this, and that's going to be the different options for the 3 cav lineup for 7 marches. But once again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I do think that if you force me to pick the best possible 7 army lineup, it would probably be something like this, where you do have the ranged march at the bottom. I know a lot of people talk about having like your 7th march should be like a leadership march or something like that. I don't see the reason to build a leadership set for leadership commanders. The future of leadership commanders in the field is always in question. Every couple of years they give us one, and it's just like, what do we do with this, right? Most people just use them as a universal secondary, so I'm not going to point you in the direction of building leadership gear. But if you did do that, then I bet Shiskel probably made a video about that or something. I don't know, you guys could check that out, but I'm not going to point you in that direction. We're just going to go with this. And with that being said, guys, if you made it to the end of the video, consider dropping a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel a ton. Subscribe if you're new here, and click the bell if you don't want to miss breaking news. We should be expecting a lot coming up throughout the rest of this year, so definitely click that bell and comment down below your favorite 3, 5, 7 army lineups in Rise of Kingdoms. I would love to hear from you guys. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.